I should tell you a little about what this this book is not. This book is not a bottoms-up look at what happened during Katrina. It's not two men in a rowboat. It's none of that stuff. It's a top-down look at disasters shown through Katrina, and they're disasters that could happen anywhere. It could be a chemical spill or a fire or an earthquake. It could happen in Kansas or California or any other place. I should tell you something else that I don't think our book really does justice to, which is that you hear a lot of rhetoric about this storm and how it's this mega storm and how it caught everybody by surprise and how nobody could stop what happened in New Orleans. And the sad fact is that what happened in New Orleans didn't have much to do with Katrina. Katrina hit 50 miles to the east of New Orleans. What happened in New Orleans is that these federal levees, they were built by the federal government, not the crooked state government. They collapsed, and they collapsed way below their design rated strength. They were rated at 11 feet, and the storm surge was around 8 feet, and they just fell down. And that is what caused the disaster. So you'll hear a lot, of rhetoric from Washington about how this just couldn't be helped. This storm was so big, there's nothing we could do about it. And the sad fact is, this whole regime is set up around predicting what's going to happen, not waiting for something to happen and then reacting. This storm approached the city of New Orleans at walking speed. The storm had been war-gamed. They knew exactly what would happen if the storm hit the city of New Orleans. Just the year earlier, during a Hurricane Pam exercise, that was the fake storm that they had hit New Orleans, they predicted that 60,000 people would die. And in that exercise, they told the locals and they told FEMA exactly how much supplies they would need to pre-position if this storm approached. And FEMA ignored that. They said they needed, I think 50 truckloads of food. FEMA pre-positioned 10 truckloads of food. They said they needed 10 pallets of generators. FEMA had 2 pallets of generators. And on down the line, they didn't have enough bottled water. They didn't have tarps. They didn't have all the things that you need to deal with any kind of hurricane. And I think Chertoff said it best. If disaster hits, you're on your own. And that's the lesson of New Orleans. And it's not about the local government. The local government doesn't have helicopters and bottled water and 500 buses with 2 sets of drivers idling 24 hours a day outside City Hall. When you step outside of your house, God forbid, and see the sky lit up orange one day, it's not going to be your local mayor that you're going to want to count on. It's going to be your federal government. This is why you pay taxes, to keep your family safe. This idea that we're all safer since 9/11 is a canard. This was no bolt out of the blue. They knew exactly what would happen if this hurricane struck New Orleans, and they fiddled. And that is because of the way the system is set up, not because of personalities. It's not George Bush or Brownie or any of the other characters. It's the way the system is set up, and it's broken. And people ought to think about that. And they ought to ask hard questions of their government when they do. This book is is not a polemic. It's a work of journalism. It's very fair. It's very straight. I thought I was going to go into this thing and rip Brownie one. I was going to get medieval on that dude. And that didn't happen. And this wasn't Brownie's fault. It wasn't Bush's fault. It's just the way the thing is set up, and it has to be changed. So, it's not much of an intro, and I'm willing to say a lot more, but maybe you have some questions about it. Anyone? I think I'm supposed to wait for the microphone. I think they wanted me to talk a lot longer about this.
So explain to me what you mean when you say that it's the way that the system is set up.
Well, after 9/11, they decided that they didn't have a very good emergency response regime in place. And, you know, it's more likely that a flood or a fire is going to affect you than a terrorist attack. But they set the whole system up to respond to terrorist attacks. And so all the money and all the resources go toward that, and very little goes toward the sort of everyday events that happen. In essence, you know, natural disasters are for pansies, and real men handle the terrorist stuff. And the real men get the money, and the pansies get stuck in the basement. And that's exactly what's happened. They've created this thing called the Department of Homeland Security. It's a 180,000-man bureaucracy, of which FEMA is a tiny, tiny part. FEMA is stuck way down in the basement. They don't have the president's ear. They have to go through many layers of bureaucracy to get anything done. And that's a sad thing, because FEMA doesn't have helicopters. FEMA has to borrow helicopters from the Pentagon. And to do that, they need somebody like the president to ask for the helicopters. We have a little thing in our book. I think it was Monday. The hurricane hit on Monday. Tuesday morning, Brownie called the Pentagon and said, I've got an urban rescue squad sitting in California. They got rubber boats and people who are trained to rescue people in urban settings, and I got to get them to New Orleans because they can save lives. And he called the Pentagon. I think he talked to a colonel, and the colonel said, well, what do you need? And Brownie said, I need an airplane to bring them and all their material up here. I need like a C-130 or something, a little transport plane. And the colonel said, well, that would have to be approved by the Secretary of Defense, and he's not here. So why don't you call back? Well, the Secretary of Defense was sitting at a baseball game in San Diego, it turns out. So you see the problem. Now, if Brownie could call the president and say, I need this plane, I really need this plane, the president could call Rumsfeld, even if he was at a baseball game, or probably even order the colonel to set the plane on the tarmac. This went on constantly. Hurricane hit Monday. Tuesday, Governor Blanco and Brownie are standing at the Superdome. There's this crowd of people walking down Poitras, walking through the water, carrying their pathetic possessions in garbage bags and wading through at least waist-deep water. And all around her are thousands of people who have no food and no means at all. They need help. And Blanco said, we got to do something about this. And Brownie says, what do you need? And she says, I need 500 buses. And Brownie says, well, if there's anything FEMA can do, it's buses. I'll have the buses here tomorrow. So they walk back to the to the chopper that brought him in, and Brownie flips this request over to one of his boys, and he says, make the buses happen. All right, so the boy says, all right, to make it happen, I've got to get Blanco's boy to sign off on the request for 500 buses. So that happens a couple hours later. And then the request goes to FEMA headquarters in Washington. And there it sits for, 6 hours.